Podcast。 Hello, good morning.
好，大家早安。首先感谢各位来到我们西康科技，今天来参加今天 ALZET 的这一场 workshop。那我们今天这场 workshop 的话，当然就是你们除了它最基本的一些原理啊、概念会提到之外，那当然还有我们会提到说它 pump 到底基本上可以用在哪些方面。那同时再来就是还有我们到后半段还有一些 handout session， 就是说，我们会现场让你们操作怎么样去 building。那当然今天机会非常难得，我们请到原厂的product manager Clarissa 来到台湾。如果说你们在使用上有任何的问题，通通都可以在这边提出做讨论，或是你们有什么样的想法，想了解说，pump 它可不可以可不可以这样用，或是这样子做，通通都可以，我们都可以拿出来讨论。And just introduce for yourself. And today we are very happy to invite ALZET to come to Taiwan to have this workshop. And if any question you have, just please raise your hand. And for the online audience, you can left your question or chat box, and we will help you to ask your question here. Okay. And for following time, let's introduce Clarissa. Okay, it's your turn. Sorry.
Thank you. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for having us. We're very happy to be here in Taiwan and seeing your beautiful country. So thank you. I have a lot of information to share. And as Jerry said, please feel welcome to ask any questions if you think of them while I go through the slides. These are the topics that I'll talk about: dosing goals, dosing methods, an overview of the ALZET products, different research applications, best practices, and then resources that are available to you. So our goal with dosing, of course, is to make the test agent available at the site of the tissue so that you can observe the effect that you need. It sounds very simple, but of course it's very complex, and there's so many different factors that can influence whether or not a drug reaches your target tissue. Factors that have to do with the formulation, drug properties, pH, vehicle, factors that have to do with the animal subject, like the disease state, phenotype, gender, age, body weight, all of these things. The route of delivery is very important, and of course the delivery method, which is our focus for today. There are so many dosing methods that one could use to deliver the drug into the animal: syringe pumps, oral gavage, injections, pellets, dosing in food and water. Of course, of these, injections is probably the most common. It's most easily done, it's very low cost, but we know that there are some inherent challenges that go along with delivering drugs by injection. So, for example, if we look at this picture here where this is plasma level, drug plasma level over time. If one is dosing by daily injections, this would be the yellow line. So you can see that the plasma level spikes quite high following the injection. And at that high plasma level, it's possible to have side effects. Certainly there's drug being wasted because it's the plasma level and the drug level in the plasma has exceeded the target dose, which is that dark band in the middle of the graph. And then as the drug is metabolized, the plasma level falls to zero where there's no effect for some amount of time. And so the idea with infusion is to be able to deliver the dose and maintain it in the target dose range for a period of time in order to see the effects of the target of the therapeutic agent develop fully. So injections can result in inconsistent drug levels. They might require that you come to the lab at night or on the weekend to continue a dosing study. Certainly there's more risk of toxicity at the high plasma levels and underdosing before the next injection. And it may just be an inadequate method for a compound that has a short half-life. The role of infusion dosing is to reduce this variability of drug levels in the plasma, to reduce the time that you have to spend coming to dose the animals over the course of a long study, to reduce the stress to the animals by frequently handling them, picking them up to do the injections, which we know can cause physiological changes in the animals that can interfere with what the study markers that you're looking at, to allow the animals to be freely moving and group housed, and hopefully with all of these to improve the quality of the data for your study. This was an observation made by researchers doing a study using ALZET pumps in a 4-week infusion in NOD skid mice, and they actually used a 2-week pump and then replaced it surgically after two weeks to go for the full 4 weeks. And their comment was that the mice did not show any signs of toxicity, stress, weight loss, or changes in feeding behavior during the study. And in this study, the researchers were using ALZET pumps model 2004 for an 18-day infusion in Han Wistar rats in a paper published in 2017. And their observation was that this method of chronic delivery prevents painful daily injection and subsequent behavioral changes in treated animals. So these were benefits that they observed using the ALZET pumps instead of doing injection. So what are the ALZET pumps? These are fully implantable miniature infusion devices for continuous delivery in unrestrained lab animals like mice and rats. It can help to understand how the pump works. And so this is a picture of the inside of the pump. The outside covering is a semi-permeable membrane. This is actually the part of the pump that determines the release rate from the pump. And then underneath that is an osmotic layer. It's mostly sodium chloride. So this is what sets up the osmotic gradient between the pump and the environment of the animal. Then there's the impermeable drug reservoir. This is a flexible reservoir where the drug sits after you inject it into the pump. And this piece called the flow moderator, which is a stainless steel tube with the plastic at one end. This is where the drug goes out as it's being delivered. So when you implant the pump into the animal, interstitial fluid comes into the pump across the outer membrane, causes the salt layer to hydrate and to swell, and squeezes the drug reservoir and just pushes the drug out through the hole at the end of the pump. So for this reason, we know that the molecular weight of the test agent that you put inside does not affect the pumping rate. So there are 12 different pump models, and so there's some considerations in choosing one pump, to which pump is best to use for your study. Of course, the size of the animal, the route of administration, the duration of infusion, the solubility and stability of the agent. And we definitely advise using the smallest pump that's possible for your study. But if the drug itself is not very soluble, you may need to go to a larger pump or to a pump with a faster flow rate. And we do have an online interactive pump selector on our website that can help with this process. These are all the different pump models. You can see the 3 different sizes: 100 microliter, 200 microliters, and 2 milliliters are the capacities. And then the durations range from as short as 1 day to as long as 6 weeks, and the different release rates for each model. And of course, the different sizes can be accommodated in different size animals. For the smallest size pump, you need at minimum a 10-gram mouse or rat to put that pump subcutaneously on the back of the animal. And it can also go into the peritoneal cavity if you have at least a 20-gram animal. For the 200 microliter pumps, the subcutaneous implantation requires a 20-gram animal, or 150 grams, so rats, if it's intraperitoneal implantation. And then the 2 milliliter pumps require, in rats, 150 grams for subcutaneous implantation or 300 grams for intraperitoneal implantation. And in all cases, if your goal is intraperitoneal delivery, it is possible to put the pump under the skin on the back and attach a catheter to deliver into the peritoneum. So it's not always necessary to put the pump itself into the peritoneal cavity. So many people just use the pumps for systemic infusion, putting the pump either in the peritoneal cavity or subcutaneously. But all of the pumps can be attached to a catheter so that the flow can be directed into an organ, to a tissue, into the vasculature. It is necessary that the compound itself is stable at 37 degrees for the whole duration of the study. I think sometimes if it's a little bit of a rush, this is maybe a step that people don't consider until later if there's a problem. So we always recommend, if you can, to check the stability of the solution for the whole study duration. You want the compound to be stable and for the compound to remain in solution for that whole period. These are just the basic steps of how to use the pumps. So preparing the solution, filling the pumps, and we'll try this later. But this is basically how you do it with the syringe, holding the pump upright, filling the pumps. Priming is a step that is required in some situations, but basically what that is, it's to take the filled pump, put it into saline at 37 degrees for a specified amount of time that depends on the pump model before implanting it, so that it's already pumping at the steady state rate when it goes into the animal. And then the implantation and the pump begins to dose. And then someone pointed out, actually on our trip here, that maybe it'd be nice to consider one more step, which is at the end, after you finish the infusion, what do you do? We do recommend that you take out the pump and check it and even measure the solution remaining inside the pump, just to confirm that what's remaining is what you expected based on your calculations. We have a number of products for neuroscience, 3 different brain infusion kits. This is the cannula and tubing to go with the pumps to enable delivery from the pump that's sitting on the back of the animal through the skull and into the brain. The 3 cannulas, I'll show a picture, but they're basically different design and different lengths. We have cannula holders, which are arms intended to go onto the stereotaxic apparatus to help you place the cannula into the brain at a specific location. And the Loctite adhesive is used to adhere the cannula to the skull for brain delivery. So the pictures on the far left are the 2 different cannula holders. The one in the left of the picture holds the cannula slightly off center so that it's actually a little easier to see when you're placing it. And the one on the right, you can see that it holds the cannula just at the end of the tip, and you just go straight down into the target coordinates. The 3 different brain infusion kits, these are actually, this picture is a little misleading. These 2 are actually the same length. No, these, having a brain freeze.
1 and 2 are the same.
So
3 have the same.
Yeah. So these 2, this one, the picture is not correct. This is the same length as this one, but you can see that the shape of the pedestal is a little bit different. This one's more flat, which is nice for mice because you don't have so much, thank you, actual examples. Not so much to cover over with the skin. And the brain kit 3, it's shorter and still has this flatter pedestal. And this is the Loctite, which is the cyanoacrylate adhesive that's used to glue the cannula onto the skull. Are there everyone's looking at the brain kits. Are there any questions about these before we go on? It's nice to have show and tell.
So what is for BIK1?
So brain kit 1, the length of that is designed for rat lateral ventricle. Yeah, so people use it for other applications, but that's a common application, and that's how we chose that particular length. Whereas the other 2, the brain kit 3, the shorter one, is designed for mouse lateral ventricle. Yeah. We also have the ALZET chemical compatibility test kit. So the pumps have been around for a long time. There's a lot of literature that indicates many compounds and vehicles are compatible with the pumps. But then sometimes you have something that's maybe it's very new. You aren't sure if it might be compatible with the material on the inside of the pump. This ALZET kit contains the material that the reservoir is made of, so that you can do a test to check compatibility if you have some concern. And on catheters, we do have 10 different catheters designed to be used with the pumps. Basically, these are for intravascular, intrathecal, and intraperitoneal delivery in rats and in mice. The other way that catheters can be used is to allow a period of surgical recovery. So it is possible to implant the pump filled with a drug solution and a catheter that might be filled with a non-drug solution, the vehicle maybe. And the idea with that is after the surgery, the pump begins pumping, and first it displaces the non-drug solution from the catheter, so that a period of time before the drug actually reaches the animal to allow time for the surgical recovery of the animal. And we also have the wound closure systems like pictured here as an alternative to suturing. So just the staples. Are these used much here? Do you use these in your labs? Yeah, yes, no? Some do, some don't. So currently there are more than 22,000 published studies that use the pumps. We do have a really comprehensive database, and we're happy to search that. If you have questions, you're looking for a research, advice on a protocol, or want to see other literature published about a particular compound, we're happy to do a search of the database for you. KYST can help make that communication, or you can email us directly and we can send you the reference list. I know so many references are available to all of you easily online, but one thing that we do is we look at every research paper and take out the information about the product, so we can tell you which pump model was used, which route of delivery, the duration, all of that very quickly. So of course the pumps we sell them empty, so they're used in a whole range of different kinds of research applications: neuroscience, cardiovascular, pharmacology, endocrinology, toxicology, cancer, and more. There are sort of three basic ways that people are using pumps. One is to actually create the disease state in the animal. A very common application is in cardiovascular work, delivering angiotensin II to raise the blood pressure and create cardiac hypertrophy and fibrosis and heart failure, and then use other means to try and treat the condition. Or the other way is to use the pumps to study new therapeutics. So for example, there's a particular study just published this year in a stroke model where they were delivering drug treatment right to the area of the stroke to evaluate the neuroprotective effects of the compound. And then just trying to contribute either to the understanding of a therapy or to a disease state. Traumatic brain injury is one area where there have been many promising molecules studied in animals, but then they don't perform well in human subjects. And in this particular paper in Critical Care Medicine and published in 2022, they were using ALZET pumps to deliver a drug called glibenclamide in a mouse model to inform understanding about different types of traumatic brain injury and look at the effects of the agent on things like brain edema, blood barrier integrity, and other markers of the injury. Some best practices when you're using ALZET pumps. Of course, I mentioned to choose the smallest size pump that's possible to make sure that the drug is stable for the duration at 37 degrees. When you're calculating the dose, to use the flow rate of the pump, which is very specific from one manufacturing lot to the next, and not use the reservoir volume, because there's plenty in the reservoir and not all of that will be delivered during that study period. The pumps come to you sterile inside the blister packaging, so we ask that you handle them in a sterile fashion as you're filling them and implanting them in the animal. When you are filling, we recommend that you compare the weight of the empty pump and the flow moderator together. Compare that with the filled pump and its flow moderator as a way to confirm that you have the pump completely filled, and that you fill slowly and use a small syringe to avoid introducing air bubbles into the pump. It is possible if you go quickly and introduce air that you get the pump just partly filled, and then as you try to continue, the solution comes out because there's an air bubble inside. So if you can go slowly and avoid having to introducing the air to begin with, that will make the filling process easier. As far as verifying delivery, it is ideal if you can measure plasma levels of the compound during the study to confirm. If you can't do that, we do recommend that you remove the pump at the end of the study and aspirate the solution from inside the reservoir to measure that and just confirm that what was delivered is what you expected. So we hope that you can let ALZET pumps do the dosing so that you can focus on the more complex aspects of your research. Any questions?
现场，我这边是你之前有问的，先帮你们问题之前要换的话，it's compound that was in that they already used the pump for a while.
Okay,
And
okay.
I have a question because so far 用的是什么型号？
我觉得这个因为它毕竟2人份的饮食，那我们要考虑，如果我们今天放，
你们现在持续给药是希望到的，还是你想说换个药去？
因为要换要多久？
哦
只是想知道这个期限。
102跟204。
对。
Okay, so far they're using 1002 and 2004.
Okay.
And they wondering to know after so far the pumps is finished the delivery and they want to exchange the pump.
Okay.
So is any suggestion to doing the exchanging to helping like the cannula stability and
Awesome.
also when we doing the exchange we have to tear in the tubing and the pump. We might got some gas into the tubing, so how to avoid that?
Yeah. Okay, so you have 1002 pumps or 2004 pumps on a brain infusion tubing and cannula, and you want to leave the cannula in place but change the pump to go for a longer period. Yeah. So certainly that's something that people do. I guess a couple of things. And you're working in mice or in rats? Mice. If you can make the tubing at the beginning a little bit longer than you might need, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters, then if you need to, you can trim the catheter. Sometimes it can be a little stretched out when you remove and replace. So that if it seems like it's not a nice tight fit when you put the new pump on, you could actually just cut maybe a millimeter from the end and then put it. If it looks like you do have air at the tip of the catheter, you can take a syringe and just fill a little bit there. Just make sure you're not doing that into the animal. You don't want to, give a subcutaneous dose accidentally. If there is a small amount of air, it won't interfere with the pump operating. It'll just move along. So you don't have to worry that if there's a tiny bit of air, that everything will stop. That won't happen.
有听懂吗？
所以有一点空气在里面，其实
应该是这样的。首先从最单就一个 translate。
Yeah.
OK， 从最前面开始说，如果你们接下来有计划打算说后面还要再多换一颗胖的去训练药的话，其实是可以让你有客户这样做。那只是他会建议说，你们一开始导管多留长一点，因为通常我们会导管推练过，你知道它一开始很长。那因为你是做小鼠的话，一定会修短。那他会建议你多留1-2 mm 左右，因为你那个 tubing 插上去到你骨内的时候，它会撑开，因为它密合。所以你拔掉之后，你插的那个部分其实它会撑开，这样再去接的话，它就会有一体或是有气体耗进去。所以你第一个就是你拔下来之后，把里面的那部分剪掉，再重新补。那再来就是，如果说你剪的时候发现里面有空气，对不对？再用试验去补一些进去。就用那个胰岛素那个是针很细，就针头往里面稍微多一点，把那气泡打出来之后，你再把它接上去。那在切的时候，其实我们那个棒里面，我们在插的时候，插去它本身就会满出来一点，对不对？那你就不要直接就把它上面插掉就行。对，就是你不要真的把它那个里面吸掉太多，因为如果吸掉太多的时候，它 base 里面有些那个吸就插过去之后，再把它 connect 起来，这样子应该一点点就比较不会有那么大的那个气泡。
这样的话，我们在装管会有遇到两个问题。第一个问题是，因为它可能到2周甚至1个月的时候，它整个泡会不会黏得很死？所以那时候也是把它直接剪下来。然后第二个问题是，我们在装泡的时候，如果刚刚那样子装的话，前面的 diffusion 对，它就会突然大量挤出药物，或甚至是往回吸都有可能。
往回吸应该是不，没事，我帮你确认一下。Okay. She extended the question for two, and the first one is, seems like for 2004, they implanted for like almost 1 month, so there's a lot of tissue was sticky on the catheter and also the pump. So any suggestion for her to decision and pumps and or how to make sure that the tube is still warm and to connect to the new pumps. So this is the first one. And the second one is because they're using the BIK brain fusion kit, so if they change the pump for I think the part of the first period of time is well the drugs, and it might have a suddenly huge high dose. Or the drugs will flow back to the pumps. Is that what happened during the pump exchanging?
So the second question, just so I understand, it's concern about giving a bolus or?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me answer this one first. Certainly when you pull off the pump, there will be a little bit of suction. It's inevitable. It should be very small. And in the same way, when you put the new pump, there's a little bit of pressure, but having withdrawn a little bit, you won't end up should not end up with a big bolus dose because you're just, reversing that, what was done when the pump was removed. That makes sense.
这段
是其实量很少。
对，因为你在拉的时候，在拆的时候，你本身就已经会有点轻微的把它反抽回来，所以你再推回去的时候，其实就是等于是我们先复回来，再正回去，所以应该不会差。但是前面那一段就是应该就是会是上的药物，所以可能不会是马上会是有的药物，它会把前一段的药物给才会换到，你们可能要评估一下那边的损失。Yeah, so I think the first one drug will left in the VIK for a while, so should they calculate for the first day or 2 days, it will be the previous drug?
Oh, they're changing the drug.
Yeah, if they change the drug.
Oh, well, so if the second pump has a different drug, then you still have all of the solution that's in the catheter that will be delivered before that new drug reaches the animal. So, I mean, they can calculate what that volume is. We can, I don't remember for vinyl tubing what the volume is, but we can share with you how to calculate the volume of the tubing based on its length and the dimensions of the tubing. And that you can use that to predict how long it will take for that to be delivered before the new drug reaches the animal. But it's not a trivial amount. It's going to be several days, probably, depending on the length of the tubing. And then, go ahead, translate.
Sorry. 所以它这就两个状况，一个状况是用药物，但是如果你们用的是不同的药物，我们可以提供你们怎么样去计算说你现在前面那个导管，所以你们就我刚才必须要注意到说，前面几天左右会先把前面的药物给，才会是你们后面的药物进到区域去。所以这个就是你们在做那个设计的时候要小心的地方。Okay.
And then the first question was about how to more easily change the pump when there's maybe tissue around the catheter and around the pump. I think I heard a question in there too about how to know if the catheter is still patent, even though there's tissue, but the tissue should all be on the outside. So that you shouldn't have any tissue growing on the inside of the tubing. So that part shouldn't really be a concern. But as far as being able to access the pump and tubing easily to change it, after 4 weeks So, I mean, the pump and the tubing, it's a foreign body in the animal. So we would expect there to be some scar tissue formation, some fibrosis around the pump itself. And it can vary. The longer the implant is there, the more of that there will be. If you know that you'll be changing it, one way to minimize that tissue formation, as long as it doesn't interfere with your study, if you can touch the area one time a day and just move the pump a little bit, just to disrupt that formation of the tissue, that can make a big difference.
这个是每天就是弄
对，你就每天稍微，因为我们是放在皮下，所以就每天稍微，你不要让它停在那个皮下，要不然它那个就会粘很上。你就每天都要去搓一下那个导管，它就比较不容易粘，让套皮下。
It doesn't take much. You maybe don't even need to get the animal out of the cage to do it. Just very simple.
甚至都把它拿出来，就演的跟你们 BIKC 演的几步大。还有什么想问的？
Do you suggest that mice can be used for monostomatic experiment after install red osmosis?
I didn't understand the question.
Do you suggest that mice can be used for monostomatic
For-
the behavior test?
Can they be used for behavioral tests?
After install.
Yes, yes. What kind of testing? Are you talking about like water maze or some other kind of? Is it motor or behavioral?
In the pool,
Water.
that the mine.
Is it Morris water test? Yes, yes. It can be. And there are studies published where that's been done, and Sam's making a note. We'll send you some references where that's been part of the testing.
always water mask and road harrow related paper about
Morris water maze and
the road harrow test.
rotorod. Yes, both. Yes. Rotorod. Mhm.
And here's a question from the audience. If it is used for 4 weeks, is it acceptable to leave it in a place for longer? How long can the pumps remain in the body? Because the mice continuously experiments and might repeat anesthesia procedure are not still.
Yeah. So the pumps do have to be removed after 1.5 times the life of the pump. So for example, if it's a 2-week pump, by 3 weeks, so 2 weeks plus 1 week, by 3 weeks, we recommend that you take it out. But also it's important to know the pump, if it's a 2-week pump, it doesn't actually just stop at 2 weeks. And so you can calculate the actual duration of a pump. You'll know how much you filled it with, you know the release rate, you know how long you primed it for, so you can calculate what's left. But often they'll go several days longer than that duration that's listed in our catalog. So that's important to know.
Question from the questions we collected before the workshop. So, is there any way to do the troubleshooting for the pumps how to make sure they are really fitting very well? Because some of in one of our groups they ever have the experience when you fill in all the pumps is floating in a normal setting.
They're floating.
Yeah.
I mean, so the way to determine whether they're filled completely is to weigh the pumps. So weigh it empty with the flow moderator, fill it, put the flow moderator into the pump, weigh it again. And it should be more than 90% of the mean fill volume that's listed on the package. So that's how to confirm that it's filled. If you do have a lot of air bubble in there, then it won't be delivering your drug.
So usually what we fill, it should be synced to the pump. Or depends on what we filling up.
Well, it's certainly, but that I'm not sure actually if they sink or float. I think that they should sink, but it would depend on what's in there, whether it's weighs more It's likely going to be, in general, less dense. I don't know.
In our experience, both of the user, when they drink the pump, it should be synced to the bottle.
Yeah, it seems like is what I would expect. To be honest, when we test them, we don't put them alone. We have a holder that they're in, so we don't ever check to see whether they float or sink. We'll check. We'll test that. We'll try that when we get home and see.
Also suggest you can have some put that pump into the cell.
No, I think when they're going to sink down, I mean, when people prime them, they don't ever have trouble with them floating around in the solution. So,
Okay.
yeah, they will submerge.
If the pump everything immersed in the PS or something, the PS will
Then it will get inside.
Because if you think about it, yeah, you filled it, so there's no place for it to go inside because it's already filled.
usually immerse in the surgery and then before the surgery we inject. So it's better to inject the drug before immersion.
Yes.
Yes.
And sometimes people are worried about doing that because you think, I don't want all my drug to come out while I'm priming it, but that's not what happens. The pump really can't begin to pump very effectively until it's already taken on some fluid, and then it begins to pump out. But the reservoir is plenty large enough to last for the whole, 2-week or 4-week duration. You don't have to worry that priming will lose too much so that it won't pump the whole time.
Yes, I think the following question is from Masonry is wondering to know any catheter can be used for trachea.
Yeah. So actually we have, in the portfolio here,
I think the and then
yeah.
I want to see the tube.
So you're rat or mice?
Rat.
Rats, okay. So these two here,
Tube.
this is just, that doesn't look great. I think that's the stylet. I think this catheter is missing from this, but this is the long one.
The cluster is the same.
No, this one, this one's shorter. That's all.
But never have the tube.
Sorry?
Oh, this one. It doesn't have the
This
tube.
is a stylet. This is not a catheter.
I
This
see.
is the stylet. See, like you can see this one has the stylet in the middle of it. This is the wire.
I know.
Right? This one's missing from this set.
So 其实有比较想看 short，它的前面这边呢，它这是70引发场，那它前面的这边的内径 ID 跟 OD 大概也是这么粗。
So the OD and ID is as the shorter one is as the same as the longer one.
The dimensions are here. I do think that they're the same. So,
然后它后面这边是接泡，
这边是接泡。
这边是接泡。
yeah. So
One French.
one French for both.
Yeah，应该是一样，因为他们两个都是前面这边它都是写到 one
可
French。
是这个可能没有办法，有办法。
So the end that connects to the pump, it's the same for every catheter. And then it goes smaller for the insertion to the intrathecal space.
这边记得一定是这样，同样的，不管它所有的 kit 都是一样。那这个就
没关系，因为我
前面都越来越
brand 像这种，它后面这个很粗，是不可能说它。
那它前面一定是就是越来越小，所以它这边的 tips 都是以 French。一个 French 的话大概0.33。
所以 tube 来的时候，前面就是只有这样，
就
它没有 hold 的，因为我们要买管嘛，我们是从 L5 到 L6 之间的 spine 的 gap 插进去，所以它前面是没有一个 hold 的。
So there's no holder in front of the catheter.
Holder, like
it's-
for suturing.
Yeah,
因为这个太软，
because that is kind of too soft, and they will insert the catheter into the L5 to L6.
They're inserting L5, not occipital. Then the short one. You'll want to use the short one.
we're doing the intrathecal is for the lumbar
Yeah.
spine or this to the spinal gap injection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the short one is the one people use. Sometimes people even use the brain infusion cannula also. I've heard of this, where they remove part of the spinous process and just use the cannula, the metal cannula, and glue it. There are some different techniques. Hey, Sam, maybe we could check for, she's doing lumbar, like L5, L6. Yeah, I know, because people have mentioned using the brain cannula also in that area.
它这个管子很细，在插管的时候会有点出血，
Rat.
它会出血，所以它前面会有点阻塞，所以就会造成管子长不符合。其实一开始我见到管子里面有些就是。
Any references now, just for later. Yeah, okay. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were looking in the database now. Yeah, oh, okay. L5, L6, in between.
它的前端，它这边，因为它就是会有，还是会有一点点流血，然后会有点咳，会塞住。
所以你担心这件事情。
应该是说我们有这样的休息嘛？对。
Yeah, he ever got the situation is like, even though they filled out the compound or the drug into the tubing, since he have to make a puncture first, then place the catheter inside. So when during the puncture, it will bleed. So there's a high possibility when they place the catheter into the hole, there might some clogging just in front of the catheter. Yeah, so she just want to know any solution or any suggestion for placing the catheter.
因为我们现在是 heparin， 但你后面一开始管 heparin， 可是它可能隔天的时候有点影响。可是我在隔天的时候，应该是我们手术有放。
Yeah, they were using the heparin
然后它
for
就打不出去。
for the during the surgical. Yeah, maybe they were using heparin, but she never got the situation. They use it. She used the heparin, but when they connect the pump for the second day, it's already clogged. It's already clogged.
So they're not connecting the pump at the same time they're doing the cannulation.
Yeah, they already connect the pump at the same time, but he found that so that for the second day, the drug should be delivery.
Yeah, yeah.
They found that it's
Some clotting.
something stuck there, and it should have some like drug effect that is able to find, but she didn't see. 我这样子就是对，因为你们是直接买的时候就已经胖。
就是我们在买管前管路内，我们就会加入了微量的 heparin。然后就是 pump 打药之后嘛，那我们就是 intrasiva 做进去之后，后面我们就会直接把 tube 跟接起来。可是就是有的时候就是会遇到，就是它管路之间它就是有 clog， 因为当你的 spine 像我们下的方法，因为它前面没有空的不破开的情况下直接插下去，它一定会归零，因为它的 I 很确定，所以它就会出血。那所以我们在国外的网站上是有看过人家做类似像一个针，然后它可以直接把这个 intrasiva tube 这样下去，那这样好像可以减缓，
然后再把针推掉。
对，可是我就是没有看到他们有类似的产品或者是。
That's a lot to translate.
Yeah. It's not. It's not just some technical. I think it's more about a technical issue because I think there's no like a guide needle for one branch catheter. Since she ever could find some reference, they're using a guide needle with a catheter.
Stylet. So our catheter has a stylet.
Yeah.
So she'll place it with a stylet and then withdraw the stylet. That draws some cerebrospinal fluid back into the catheter, and maybe a little bit of blood if it's split, and then you attach the pump. So that's the normal way to do it. I would say, one thing I would say is to try and keep the pump warm until, so you've incubated it, primed pump, bring it to the surgery, bring it in the warm saline so it's not sitting cold. Just trying to keep it pumping.
I use the water base to warm the pump at
37, yeah.
And now I have a tube one use, put out now. Right.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Because some people just put it on the surgical drape
Yes.
and it sits there and gets cold. And then if you want it to be pumping, there's a gap.
这问题就是在第二天，就是我接好第二天。
The most of the time she got the problem is in the second day.
Yeah.
你是打材料，就是说有效果，第二天看得出来。
应该是说我们的 S 手嘛，我们打入烫手，我大概是3到7天，然后我们可能最后牺牲的时候会遇到一些问题，因为你烫可能你会打成功看，最
So
后也会确认完，所以有的老鼠成功，有的老鼠失败。
Okay, so how do you make sure that the cassette is working or not? Maybe sometimes they have delivered the exosome
Okay.
to the animal. So she told me it's easy to check it's successful or not during the delivery. But most of the time when they sacrifice the mouse, the rat and mouse,
Oh, right.
Rat.
you just find out the drug didn't deliver out and the stock and the cassette is clogging on the tip. She already used the heparin like to
Yeah.
prime before and also have a very short volume inside of the cassette to try to avoid the clogging. But somehow finally it's still
clotting.
It's still clogging.
one thing I was going to say about drug effect on day 2 is that you don't have drug in the catheter, so it does take some time for the drug actually to reach the animal. So you have to consider that because they're not, in this instance, they're not filling the catheter with drug because of the stylet. But how to avoid the clotting? I mean, the heparin is the only suggestion I would have. She's already doing it.
Yeah, me too.
第二天就在 bread， 我们不会遇到这个，
目前就是
这个时候在 spine 就已经超级难，所以
有点像，就是有点
尴尬，
碰到瓶颈，对不对？
对，这个是有，而且感觉是很没有办法预测。当然说我们尽量都是减少它会流血，可是就是当你错开它，
OK。
因为我自己抽脑底水液。我有试过打开抽，就是会流血，完全不要不开抽就是跟这种情况，所以
Okay. They actually she used the both BIK to brain infusion is always very successful. But she didn't get any trouble to
Yeah.
time open.
Yeah.
And now they're well forwarding the research to to the intrathecal delivery. But somehow if you break the IPC, it's just bleeding. It's always bleeding, and she just want to know. So far, it's kind of their bottleneck so far because the bleeding will highly cause the clotting in front of the cassette and make the delivery unsuccessful. So far, she got this bottleneck here, and then he's trying to make it to confirm. Okay, all the issues come from bleeding. It's not come from the pump. But if we can provide some solutions or some suggestions to make her procedure being success, that will be helpful.
Yeah, I don't have the answer for her right now, but I would be happy to research that for her and see if I can ask some others that have more experience with that surgery than I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
就目前来说，明确答案。
所以我才会想说，我想看前面有没有比这个再粗一点，因为我大概用 PE10可以减缓这个症状。
So far, she tried about a PE10. It's reducing
因为这个比 PE10 难使。
the clotting.
PE10 is really stiff, so I think that's probably too aggressive, too stiff. You know, stiff. Yeah.
Yes.
I think a softer material would be. You may have less bleeding with a softer material, like this is silastic, I think, or polyurethane. But it has a stylet, so that's what makes it stiff enough to implant is the stylet. But then you remove that.
那你这边还没事情要
那我们遇到的状况是，你在选埋进去以后，因为它管子其实是不会接起来，它管子其实不会离开它的脖子上，它就会来回走动，它这边就是 over 其实
会稍微有点。
对，那我们一直一轮有时候还是可能被他们一起咬，然后抓掉。那我遇过一直一轮放1个礼拜，都是不舒服，再把它们吃放回来，然后就隔天全部咬得不开心。 就开了。
所以你们现在开始把它买冰箱，然后上面这个部分就被咬掉，还是
就是上面这个 tube 就会把皮肤凸起来那一块。
I know what this question is.
现在是有两个。
我们现在是用线，那个长线，
用长线线，所以你开那个网插进去之后，先用线绑起来，没有再去用其他东西固定。
这个上面有一个蓝色的胶，是可以拿用胶
没有的去，
然后粘完以后再皮的时候就是用线，
但是他们还是会咬开。
而且这放了1周以后再。
So much they got the issue about not only about group housing, but also the single housing. They finish their surgical and using the PIK3 with the tubing. Sometimes the mouse will like it. I'm not sure if it's maybe itching or something else, and then they will tear down all the skin and also all the bread. And then during the group housing, they will like to bite each other or even though sometimes they play with each other and then just grab out the tubing and also the cannula.
Yeah.
So do you want to know if any suggestion to fix up the cannula better to avoid the mouse to scratch up or tear it down?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes people have this problem. It's not just your situation. I think it all has to do with the length of the catheter. So if you make it too short, it can be a problem. And if it's really, really long, it can be a problem. You need to trying to find the right length, maybe making it a little bit longer than now, because what can happen is the catheter can lift up the skin and then the skin starts to die. There's pressure and it loses the fur, it starts to scab because it doesn't get good circulation. And sometimes it looks like it's happening because the other animals are, because it's being scratched, but it really is just because the skin is not getting good circulation because the pressure from the catheter. So maybe a little bit longer. It's hard for me to say for sure if you need to go longer or shorter because I don't know how it is now. The general rule of thumb is about 25% longer than the distance. So that basically you want enough so that it's not lifting up and pressing on the skin.
就是长一点
对对，因为如果你太 fix 的话，他们在动的时候可能刚好会直接压迫到。因为其实我们人在就是包含我们人在动的时候，其实这边的距离是不完全会被拉长。所以你弄得太 fix 的话，老鼠可能不变，它能一直拉扯，就压迫到它附近的组织，让它循环不好。那你一直压迫久，动物就觉得那边不舒服，可能会产生一些别的发炎反应或等等。所以他们建议是再多25%，给它有点类似给它有点伸缩的空间，就比较不容易去压迫到周围的组织。
Do you find that after you implant it that the pump moves very much from where you put it? Does it slide down?
2.5 cm or 3 cm.
Yeah. And do you find that the pump moves from the place where you put it? Does it move down towards the tail or to the side? No, not really. Okay.
好，还有没有什么想要问的？那面若，那就是因为我们的这个部分，如果没什么问题的话，就稍作休息，待会稍微重新布置一下，就会做那个黑亮的部分。没关系，机会难得，因为他是现场，就是如果说他知道事情，他就会。
算很有经验。
对对对。
Translation.
Yeah, she has a.
Another question? Okay, yeah.
Question in my environment. 我想一下哦。OK。
Bring my copy.
Because we use the kids,
Yes.
about 3 and and I thought if I want to inject around the baby 1 mm.
Okay.
I need to stick 4.
It's too much. It's too high.
I
Yeah.
have this problem.
We used to have a company that made custom length cannulas, but they have recently stopped doing that. But I had another customer, actually a customer in Korea, also ask for a custom length of cannula, because it's not our specialty to make lots of different cannulas. We have a few to make it easier for customers, but there's a company called Plastics One. It's in the US, and it's their specialty making the cannulas. It is
那我们今天直播就到这个段落，那感谢各位的参加。如果接下来有任何使用上面的问题的话，那欢迎跟我们联络。那后面的 handout session 的部分的话，我们这边会尽量看能不能提供录影给各位观众。那有后续的资讯，我们都会发信件给你们。那谢谢各位今天的参与。